Assalamu alaikum everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen. Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. All praise belongs to Allah. Blessings and salutations on the noblest of prophets and messengers, our leader Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and on his family and on his companions. Jazakumullah khair for coming to Halaqa tonight. This will be the last Halaqa of the semester, and then inshallah we're going to take a hiatus for winter break, and we'll resume inshallah next semester. So we're picking up where we left off last week. We finished, we spoke in depth about the Adab and the etiquettes of the Prophet ﷺ's teachings on how we should eat and the sunnahs of eating. So we're going to pick up and finish this section and talk about the walking and sitting of the Prophet ﷺ and the lessons that we can learn from that. So to begin with, at the top of the slide, it says, when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ walked, he bent slightly forward as if he was descending from a high place. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu says, I did not see anyone more handsome as Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was as if the brightness of the sun had shone from his auspicious face. I did not see anyone walk faster than him, as if the earth folded for him. A few moments ago he would be here and then there. We found it difficult to keep pace when he walked with him, and he walked at his normal pace. And we'll get to the next hadith in a second. So those hadith together are really, really, I mean, as they all are, mashallah, instructive for us, and there's a huge didactic value to them. And for our purposes, you know, one of my teachers said, of the lessons and the jewels that we can learn from studying the physical gait of the Prophet ﷺ. And it's really interesting that Imam Tirmidhi narrates both of these, because there's more hadith that Imam Tirmidhi relates in his beautiful compendium called the Shama'il, which is considered by scholars one of the greatest. It's 400 hadith approximately, and if you study it, and alhamdulillah, I was blessed to study with Sheikh Muhammad Yaqubi in Medina Munawwara, is that literally outside of Masjid al-Nabawi, and if you study that, it has every physical characteristics of the Prophet ﷺ, in terms of his smile, in terms of his hair, in terms of his physical features, in terms of his how he would laugh, how he would walk, how he would sit, how he would use his hands when he would eat, and then there's even further descriptions in that as well, including his garments, including his sword and his ring. It's all in there, and from that we derive actually beautiful lessons beyond just the physical aesthetic beauty, which is itself captivating, but then beyond that, which is the internal characteristics of the Prophet ﷺ and how they were manifested in the outward and the relationship between the two. So the purpose here for this is that we know two takeaways are this: the Prophet ﷺ didn't lollygag. I love that word. Lollygagging is that you find people, unfortunately, they're very lackadaisical. The way they walk, it's like this really slow-paced, meandering kind of stroll. And what they said is that when we walk with the Prophet ﷺ, he ultimately was a man that walked with intention and a purpose, right? There's the idea of the purposeful walk, that he was walking and he was very motivated in what he was going from place A to B to C to D. And so, the lesson there is that the Prophet ﷺ understood the reality of this life, I mean, better than any of us did, right? In that every moment of your life is precious, and even going from one place to another, from one engagement to another, from one appointment to another, going from a serious matter to a less serious matter, etc., whatever it is, the idea is that there's an intentionality behind everything that you do. And I think that that's really imperative for us to understand and to implement in our lives, is that it's seen by the companions in literally just the way that he walked. And from that, they derive the ideas that the Prophet ﷺ didn't take anything for granted. Everything had a motive behind it. Everything had an intention behind it. Everything had a beauty behind it as well. There was an external beauty and there was an internal beauty to it. And look at Abu Hurairah, what he's saying. I didn't see anyone more handsome than the Prophet ﷺ. And he's starting with the outward. And he says, it's as if the brightness of the sun had shone from his auspicious face. And there's another beautiful hadith, which I actually quoted at the Sira program I did this Saturday at the Berlin Masjid. I'm not sure if I remember to quote it on the Friday program we had here, but there's a beautiful hadith that we can read in relation to this. Jabir radiallahu anhu says that once I was sitting in Masjid al-Nabawi, and one of the amazing things about Masjid al-Nabawi, and if you've been to it today, you can see it's aesthetically beautiful, right? But we cannot even imagine the beauty and the power of Masjid al-Nabawi that the Prophet ﷺ built with his own hands, right? In that it was a very simple, very humble structure, largely a dirt floor, with some sand and gravel, as we would say, with adobe kind of walls, with trees as the pillars and columns, right? Actual date palm trees. And then they had a thatched roof. So they had date palm leaves, right? Interlocking over not even the entire masjid, just the front part of the masjid, right? The back part of the masjid was like an open air. And so what happened is that when you would sit there, and Jabir was saying is that I was sitting in the masjid in the Halaqa of the Prophet ﷺ, and it was a full moon. And tonight is like the 15th of Rabi al-Awwal, right? And so he says that, which is a full moon. And he says that when I looked at the face of the Prophet ﷺ, it was so luminescent. It was so illuminated. It was so bright that it was eye-catching. And then out of the corner of my eye, I saw in the night sky the full moon. And I was like amazed and dazzled by the luminescence of the full moon. And then I looked at the Mubarak, beautiful face of the Prophet ﷺ, and then I looked at the full moon, and Jabir was saying that I couldn't decide which was more luminescent, which was brighter and more beautiful. And then he finally concludes by saying, it was the face of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right, it was brighter than the full moon. And if you've ever seen a full moon, on a clear night when when there's no clouds whatsoever, it actually takes your breath away. Right, it's that captivating. Now, one other thing to keep in mind, this is only the external beauty of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The internal beauty of the Prophet ﷺ was far beyond even the external, as our scholars say. But even his external beauty, he was the most handsome human being created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a saying that's related to Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha that said that, the Quran talks about the physical beauty of, amongst other characteristics, of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam. And the story, it's in Surah Yusuf, right? That Zulaykha, when Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam was in her court, and Zulaykha had the women in her court, she had him hidden off camera, so to speak, right? He was out of the scene, and she told him to walk in front. And it's narrated that when he walked in front of all of the women in the court of Zulaykha's, the wife of the Aziz, right, in the court, that the women were so like mesmerized by the beauty of Sayyidina Yusuf that they cut their hands, right, with the knives that they were cutting fruit with. To imagine what that must do to have that sort of momentary being mesmerized in that moment, right? Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha said that when Zulaykha's women saw the beauty of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, they cut their hands. If the people saw the beauty of my Muhammad ibn Abdullah, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, they would have cut their hearts. Right, that the beauty of Prophet ﷺ externally was even greater and surpassed the beauty of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam. And that's why there's a whole other genre, like I said, in the Shama'il of Imam Tirmidhi, and there's other hadith that talk about it as well. And it's beautiful to relay those for us to understand that the Prophet ﷺ was insani kamil. And this is what we spoke about on Friday night. He was the perfect human being. And that's what Sidi Abdurrahman talked about in his khutbah on Friday, is that he internally and externally was the absolute perfection and the pinnacle of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in human form. And we believe that about him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then he says, I did not see anyone walk faster than him. It's as if the earth folded for him. A few moments ago, he would be here, and then he would be there. We found it difficult to keep pace when we walked with him, and he walked at his normal pace. And so the takeaway for this is that we need to be people that even when we walk, whether it's in your office or to your lab or to the library or to your room, or you're going out with your friends or you're walking by yourself, is that we have that sense of purpose and intentionality behind what we're doing, right? Now, there's nothing wrong with taking like a leisurely stroll if you need to sort of decompress and get, in a certain headspace, right, and physically kind of unplug and whatnot. But to also understand that you can tell a lot about people by the way they walk, right? And I won't say much more about it in that there's a lot that we want to cover, but that we want to be people that have a purposefulness and a seriousness behind all of our actions. May Allah Ta'ala make us to be such people. Ameen. The Prophet ﷺ said, do not ask someone to give up his seat in order to take it, but make accommodation wide and sit at ease. It was Sayyidina Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu's habit that if a person left his seat for him, he would not take it. Now, two takeaways from this. Do not ask someone to take his seat in order to take it, to give up his seat, in order to take it, but make accommodation wide and sit at ease. The idea there is that we shouldn't be the type of people that when we walk into a place that we have some expectation of what they call protocol, right? Like, you're in my seat. Like, I say, this is a reserved area for me. And, we live in a society where it doesn't have that kind of those social protocols per se, right? For better or worse, these things are really eroding or have been eroded and continue to be eroded day in and day out in our society. But there are cultures where there is that sense, right? And a healthy way of saying it is that, like, a younger person should out of deference give it to a teacher or to an elder or to their parents or to someone like that, right? And I mean, that comes from a good place of adab, right? That you give up your seat when a teacher or an elder or a sibling, an older sibling, a Baha'i, Bahan, as we say, right, comes into the room. And you know that's the way Muslim cultures have traditionally, historically operated. That's one thing. But the problem here is to expect it. That when you walk into a room that people are going to treat you with such protocol. And the Prophet is instructing us in such beautiful way. Do not ask someone to give up his seat in order for you to take it, but make accommodation wide and sit at ease. And the idea there, and I alluded to this early on when we started the idea of the adab, right, of every time and place and gathering and whatnot, is that, for example, let's use this room as an example. You know, appropriate adab or ideal adab would be that if when someone walks in, they don't sit next to the door. Because if there's like many spots available across the room and you take up a spot right by the door, I mean, you have 15 other spots to choose from. And by sitting next to the door, that's inconveniencing whoever's going to walk through the door and have to hang up their coat or put down their bag or like step in, take their shoes off or whatever. And then what happens is, by the way human nature is, people that are going to walk in, then they're going to congregate around where they see other people. And then what's going to happen is all the spots by the pillar and by the door are going to get filled up, and then these are not going to get filled up, right? And what that does is over time, that inconveniences the entire gathering. Because by the end of the gathering, you know, that it's going to be imbalanced. All the people are going to be sitting over there and going to be sitting uncomfortably, and then this is going to be empty, right? So the idea is that when you walk in, you fill in empty space. And the way of filling in empty space, on one hand, is that you go towards the front. And like I alluded to this before, that's for the brothers when you arrive at Jummah, you should want to go sit towards the front and sit and fill in the front sufuf, right, of the masjid, whether it's for Jummah or it's for any other salah. When it's a halaqa, you should want to sit close to the teacher. And Imam Ahmad al-Hanbal is a beautiful example that it's related about him that when he would go in the morning at tahajjud time, before Salatul Fajr, he would go and sit in the front row because his sheikh would give the halaqa after Fajr. So he would get the reward of having the first saf of Fajr, and then afterward, after the Farad of Fajr, he would be like right up close to his teacher. And it's from the sunnah that you sit close to the teacher when the teacher is giving a dars, right? Instead of like sitting all the way in the back. I mean, obviously, if there's an excuse or there's a reason or something like that. But the point is that's, you know, if you're filing into a space and there's space in the beginning. The other is like in this kind of setting, which is that fill in the spaces that aren't already claimed. Why? Because you're not just thinking about yourself. That's the point. You're thinking about the next person that's going to come and the next person that's going to come after that and so on and so forth. That is the idea of mindfulness. Right? That you're aware of not just the consequences of your actions, like for you and yourself, but what's going to happen, you know, later on down in the course of that evening. And so here, the end of this is that the beautiful lesson. It was Sayyidina Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu's habit that if a person left a seat for him, he would not take it. And this was out of the deep humility that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu had, is that he was not one for false pretenses and for protocol, right? For demanding people treat him a certain way. And, you know, as an aside, I'll say about Sayyidina Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, I mean, all of the companions are people of Ahlul Jannah, all the Sahaba, Sahabiyat. Sayyidina Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, one of his unique characteristics that the scholars of our deen have written is that he, amongst the companions, amongst his contemporaries, was renowned and highly respected by them for being someone that was very keen to emulate the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So that the other companions knew that if you wanted to see what the sunnah was like, is that look at the behavior of Sayyidina Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, because he's someone that when he was young, right, he was raised in the house of who? Of Hazrat Umar Farooq radiallahu anhu, and grew up as a young, you know, as a shab, as a young man, or as a teenager, as a young adult around the Prophet ﷺ, and absorbed all of that like a sponge, so to speak, in that he, like, you know, was keen to observe each and every sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the way the Prophet ﷺ walked, the way the Prophet ﷺ used his miswak, the way the Prophet ﷺ would mount his camel and the way he would dismount his camel, the way the Prophet ﷺ would sit. All of these were like observed by Sayyidina Umar and he preserved those, mashallah, for the sake, obviously for, you know, to do practice upon them himself, and then obviously we're the beneficiaries of that. May Allah bless him with the highest abodes of Jannah. Ameen. Moving on, the Prophet ﷺ disliked sleeping before Isha and talking after it. Now, I'm going to talk about this for a moment. You've heard me talk about this in previous halaqas, and it's really seriously important, and that's why I continue to talk about it. And so much has been written, you know, in our contemporary time by sleep specialists, by neurologists. I have friends who are neurologists that are sleep like renowned sleep doctors, by social psychologists, on we are in a society that faces a crisis or an epidemic of insomnia, right? And also a fatigue, where people that are over caffeinated, and I understand fully well what kind of population I'm talking to here, that people abuse stimulants, a variety of stimulants to stay awake. Some people say, hey, don't hate the player, hate the game. I mean, this is kind of the nature of where we are right now, where people feel that they have to minimize the amount of sleep that they enjoy, because you're an undergraduate, you're a graduate student, you're in law school, you're in med school, and the expectation is what they call cultural martyrdom. And I encourage you to do this as a thought experiment, not even a thought experiment, as a social experiment. I want you, particularly in the next 2 weeks, as we enter the end of the semester and we enter reading week and we enter exam week. And I want you to simply do this. Be aware and cognizant of the conversations in your common room, in the dining hall, in your study sessions, review sessions. People will vie with one another to outdo their friends and peers on this idea of cultural martyrdom. That you slept 3 hours last night, I slept 2 hours last night. You pulled 2 all-nighters and, caffeinated with this and with that. Well, I had 3 all-nighters in a row. And it's sad, yet comical, yet ridiculous, the lengths that people will go to in a completely meaningless conversation, that even there's a sense of being more cutthroat than the next person, right? And that's what they call cultural martyrdom, is that you want to impress the people around you on how much tougher you are than them and how much worse you have it than them. You've got 2 exams in a day, I've got 3 exams in a day. You've got 4 P-sets due or whatever. I don't even know at this point, right? It's like what the bandwidth people have. But I just want you to do that for the next 2 weeks. And then just like, may you remember this conversation and may it have a positive impact on you, is that our deen is one of a holistic sense of well-being. Spiritual, emotional, psychological, and physical. All 4 of those need to be in harmony if you want to be healthy. You need spiritual health, mental health, emotional health, and physical health. The problem is that we're in a kind of a crucible right now. We're in a system that grinds you up. Spiritual health is completely non-existent, like in the language of this place, right? That's, unless you're like in conversations like this, that's A. B, emotional health is like, you figure that out on your own, right? You can worry about that stuff on break, right? Physical health is what people are willing to give up, right? In their exam prep, in writing their papers and writing their theses and whatnot. And what happens is mental health is the silent casualty in all of this, right? Is that people absorb so much stress and grief and anxiety, right? And that manifests in this. And there are resources, and I'm part of that healthcare system that is to promote people taking care of the advantage of mental health and spiritual health resources. But the problem is that students themselves, many of them that need it the most, are the last ones to seek it out, for a variety of reasons which we're not getting into right now. The purpose that I want to talk about right now is this beloved sunnah of our beloved Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the most effective, felicitous, and efficacious way of living your life. Is don't neglect your diet. We already talked about that on eating healthy. If you eat healthy and you eat clean, you will feel healthy, right? And for us, there's even a deeper psycho-spiritual element to it, which is that if you eat halal, your body will commit itself to halal actions. If you eat haram, your body is going to be inclined towards and susceptible more towards and vulnerable to haram actions. That is for us at a much deeper level, right? If you consume the halal, you will do the halal. If you consume the haram, you will do the haram. I'll let you fill in the blanks on how you want to fill that in. But for our purposes, the next thing I want to say is, for us, this is a blanket statement, right? It doesn't matter how busy you think you are, the Prophet ﷺ accomplished more than you will ever accomplish in your life. And I don't say that to put you down. I say it as a reality check for us to understand the mission and the accomplishments of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We have 5 daily fard prayers. The Prophet ﷺ did the 5 daily fard prayers, and his tahajjud is also, as we would say, wajib, upon him. Right? This is like technical language here, and that the Prophet ﷺ prayed tahajjud in the same way that fard is for us, right? And the Prophet ﷺ's tahajjud was, hours long. And in addition to that, he was a father, and he was an imam, and he was a statesman, and he was a neighbor, and he was a counselor, and he was a community leader, and he was any number of other things in addition to that, right? And doing all of that, and leading the community, and then took care of his body, was physically healthy, obviously emotionally and spiritually and psychologically healthy. And so what I'm getting at is simply to offer this as a piece of nasiha to you, is don't neglect your sleep. The Prophet's sunnah generally was to go to sleep soon after Isha. He did not stay awake late after Isha. The Prophet would go home after Isha in the masjid. He attended to any affairs of the household that needed to be tended to, and then the Prophet retired. And the Prophet's sunnah was, obviously, as we just talked about, was to wake up early for tahajjud. Yes.
More of a technicality, but by Isha, do you mean like when Isha time starts or when you pray Isha?
That's a good question. I believe
Nowadays, Isha comes in like
very early, yeah.
So
Sure.
You can't sleep at 6
No, exactly. This is after the Isha Jama'ah that the Prophet would have in the masjid with the Sahaba, which was, we presume later in the evening, right? When people would finish their work day, so to speak, and would go home and have dinner and attend to the affairs of their household, and then would come to the masjid in the later in the evening, and then after that, as the Prophet would go home and retire. But it's a great question, mashallah. The Prophet disliked sleeping before Isha and talking after it. So, I mean, I don't want to bore you to death. There's a lot. If you've taken a psych class, if you've taken a neurology class, they cover all of this. Like, the evidence physiologically is overwhelming. Is that people aren't sleeping enough. People are getting bad sleep for any variety of reasons, because of what they're eating, because of what they're watching. Using your devices. They call it like blue light, right? That's emitted from your screens, your tablet, your laptop, your phone. Don't have any of that. Like a certain amount of time before you go to bed. It's been proven to disrupt your neural waves, like for you to get from REM sleep to non-REM sleep to back to different sleep cycles. Like, I mean, the data is overwhelming, and the point for us is we don't need the data. The data is only like complementary there, right? I mean, we already have the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the most successful people of our Ummah. We have like a historical record on this. There's no one more successful than the Prophet ﷺ. And so what I'm simply saying and it's to myself first and foremost, is that we need to be people that take our sleep seriously, because this affects every aspect of your life. It affects your emotional health, it affects your spiritual health, it affects your physical health, and it affects your psychological health. And this is like one of the easiest quote unquote fixes that we have. What it requires is the motivation, right, for us to actually be take the necessary steps to adjust our sleep, to make more time for sleep. Now, if that requires taking a nap during the day, subhanallah, we have the sunnah of taking a nap in our tradition, right? The Prophet ﷺ would take a qaylula. Qaylula is a nap after dhuhr. The Prophet ﷺ would take a nap between dhuhr and asr. Whether you want to call it a siesta, whether you want to call it a power nap, you can call it whatever you want. But the best of creation, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, took a nap in the afternoon. And there's tremendous benefit, psychological, spiritual, and physical benefit in taking a qaylula and taking a nap. Now, I understand what you're thinking. You're like, Chaplain Sab, how is this possible with me being in my lab and me with my schedule? And you know what? You've got to be creative in figuring out a way that you want to do this. But what I'm telling you is that if there is a way for you to do this, you're going to see the benefit for it. Okay? Or like figure out some sort of nap schedule into your schedule. What I would say as well is, physicians recommend 7 to 8 hours. As another conversation, which we can talk about offline later, our mashayikh have also have written a long time ago on the ideal amount of sleep that a person should get, that a spiritual student of the path should get in order to really progress physically and spiritually on this. But the purpose is here that I want to share with us, that don't take your sleep for granted. I understand fully well that we're on the cusp of reading week. Right now. But then what I want you to try to do is, it's for your benefit, is that when you go home for break, you need to reset your sleep habits. And you need to really use that time to spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, and physically recharge and get healthy. And the last thing I'll say about this before we go on is, study after study after study has shown that physiologically and psychologically, when you go into severe sleep deficit, and you think you make it up on the weekend, it's actually detrimental. You are not helping yourself by skimping on sleep and doing like 3-4 hours a night for days on end, and then trying to sleep in on like a Saturday or a Sunday for like 12 hours or something like that. that actually the effect is, I don't want to say negligible. There's some effect, but it's not nearly as effective as you think it is, right? The takeaway is have a healthy, like normal, consistent sleep schedule to the best of your ability, and that'll give you optimal results, right? And something that we all need to learn from ourselves. And so there are people that I know that they're very disciplined with their time. On a normal day, they're like, this is the time I walk home from the library. I'm done with my work. You know, my family understands that this is the time. My friends understand that this is when, I have a routine. I have a schedule, and there's a discipline that goes to it. Now, things happen occasionally where there's maybe an exception to that, but there's a norm, and then there's maybe an exception, to the pattern. But the point is, we need to develop a pattern. And I want to belabor the point, but I just want to make sure it's clear to everyone, is that if you do this, inshallah, you will see the effects. You will see the positive effects to this, inshallah. The Prophet said to Sayyidah Hafsa radiallahu anha, the softness of the bed was a hindrance in rising up for the tahajjud prayer. And so the idea there is that the Prophet had a mattress that he slept on, and he told his wife, Sayyidah Hafsa, who was a daughter of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, that the softness of the bed was a hindrance in rising up for tahajjud prayer, which this is in the Shama'il al-Tirmidhi, which we just talked about. But the takeaway for us, because there's a lot that can be said about this, but to move on, is, this is how serious the Prophet took his tahajjud prayer. Of the many gems from this, is that it was even in the physical things in his surroundings, his environment, had an impact on his sleep and on his waking and his wakefulness, right? And so, by all means, if different people have different sleep habits and whatnot, if you can toughen yourself up to have a more minimalist lifestyle, mashallah, that's wonderful if you can do that. And I know people that do that. My own teachers do that, and I've seen it with my own eyes, and it's incredibly commendable, mashallah, and it actually is very inspiring and admirable. But the Prophet, for him, getting up for tahajjud was so critical, was so vital in his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he told his wife that the softness of the bed was a hindrance, is that and there's another narration that says that she folded it over another time to actually give more padding, right? And the Prophet asked it for it to be made simple again. There's a hadith that I was literally just reading today that I'll share, and I mentioned this in a Hasira program that I did this weekend, which I think it brings tears to my eyes when you think about it, which is actually really important when it fits into the grand scheme of all of this. The Prophet, it's a well-known hadith. The Prophet was in his room, lying on his mattress one day, and his mattress, as it's described, was simple. It was made out of leather, and it had date palm leaves and fibers in it. And alhamdulillah, when we went to Umrah this past year, we went to the farm that the Sheikh owns, and this is a very blessed farm, because this farm has trees that are the genetic offspring of trees that were planted by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Zishan, I'm sure, remembers, because he was with us on that trip. And the Sheikh gave us a tour, and we sat there and we ate there, and we it was really blessed that time there. But he showed us, and he took off the bark of the tree, and he took off the bark, and he took one of the leaves, and when the Sheikh was explaining it to us, he said, this was in the mattress of the Prophet ﷺ. I actually even have a picture of it on my Instagram, of that fiber, and it's amazing, because it's not like your comfy down pillow, right? I mean, this is serious. It's strong, durable, but not the most comfortable material, and that's what would fill the mattress of the Prophet ﷺ. But what I want to say to you is this: the Prophet ﷺ was lying down, and who walks in? Sayyidina Umar Farooq radiallahu anhu walks into, and the Prophet ﷺ gets up, and the Prophet ﷺ at that time, his shirt was his upper garment was raised, so the Prophet ﷺ was lying down, and when he got up, Sayyidina Umar saw the creases in his skin, the marks from the leaves that were going through the mattress, right, the thin leather, onto the skin of the Prophet ﷺ. And he said, Ya Rasulullah, the kings of the Roman and Persian Empire sleep on silk mattresses, and etc. He's saying those people have the height of luxury in this world. And the Prophet says, what do you think this life is for? Do you think this life is for that? He says, this dunya is not for that, for these creature comforts, the life of ease and the life of getting soft. This dunya is we're on a journey, right? This life is to be mission focused, be purpose filled, purposeful. We just literally talked about in the hadith before, and the way the Prophet walked. And he says, Sayyidina Umar began to cry. when he saw the Prophet ﷺ in that condition, because it literally pierced his heart to understand this is the best of creation, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If there was anyone that walked the face of this earth that was deserving of the ease and comfort of this world because of his maqam, because of his station in the eyes of the world, and furthermore greater than that in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was the exact opposite. He said that's for like the people that want this dunya. It's not for us, right? This is the zuhud, the asceticism, right? The simplicity of the beauty of the Prophet's lifestyle. And there are people today that you meet that live their lives like that. And this is the part of the spiritual path. And there are like profound benefits to that. Not to say that one cannot enjoy in a halal, reasonable, modest way of having some comfort in their life, right? But to aspire for always wanting, those creature comforts, that is, I think, is what's very dangerous and harmful for us. But the point is, I just wanted to mention that in this context. And moving on, Ya'ish ibn Tikfa al-Ghifari reported, my father said, I was lying down on my belly in the masjid when someone shook me with his foot and said, lying down in this way is disproved by Allah. I looked up and it was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the thing I want to share with you on this, and then we move on, is that, there's basically three ways of sleeping. You can sleep on your stomach, you can sleep on your back, or you can sleep on your side, right? You can sleep on your back, on your stomach, or on your side. Most people fall into one of these three, and obviously most people aren't static in the middle of the night, right? I mean, you shift back and forth, go back and forth in between. The sunnah of the Prophet's way of sleeping was what? And we have this in numerous narrations. The Prophet would lie down in his bed on his right side. He would put his hand under his Mubarak cheek like this, and he would lie down facing the Qibla. He would go to sleep in a state of wudu. He would say the dua, Allahumma bismika amutu wa ahya, oh Allah, in your name I live and die. The Prophet would recite, there's other narrations that say he would recite and encourage us to recite the last two ayahs of Surah Al-Baqarah before you go to sleep. He would recite the quls, the four quls, before he would go to sleep, and he would blow on his body. And this would be protection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the Prophet would sleep again on his right side with his right hand underneath his right cheek, facing the Qibla. Ideally, if you can sleep in that way, that's the optimal sunnah way of sleeping. In this case, in this hadith, he said, don't lie down on your stomach. Because there's other narrations that say this, and this is the way the shaitan sleeps, is on his stomach. This hadith says lying down in this way is disapproved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the takeaway for us is, when you start to sleep, do your best to fall asleep according to the sunnah. Lying down on your right side, ideally in a state of wudu, with your right hand, recite the dua, minimally recite the dua before you sleep. It's a very simple dua. I mean, mashallah, my kids, you recite to them, night after night, and your kids learn it. It's a one sentence dua. Mashallah, all of us know the four quls, right, to be able to recite that. And if you don't know, try to, learn the last two ayahs of Surah Al-Baqarah and recite that as well. And you'll see Allah Ta'ala will protect you at night, right, if you go to sleep in this way. Now, if in the middle of the night you toss and turn and you go on your back or your side or your stomach and you go back and forth, that's different. But you've started with the intention of emulating the Prophet ﷺ. Inshallah, there's benefit and khair in that for you. Now, the Prophet ﷺ in the next hadith said, whoever goes to sleep in a state of purity will have an angel over his head, and he will not awaken until the angel says, quote, "O Allah, forgive your servant, for he has slept with wudu, with ablution." And it's a great sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and you'll see the effects on this in your sleep, in the quality of your sleep, that if you go to sleep in a state of wudu. And that's I encourage people to make wudu before they go to sleep, or if you can ideally time it in such a way, you've finished everything you need to do to finish for the day, you've done your emails, you've stopped your studying, you've cleaned up your whatever needs to be put away, you pray your Salatul Isha or you pray your witr, and then you go to sleep with that wudu. Inshallah, there's benefit in it for you. Yes?
Yeah, it's not my question. Would he renew his wudu even if he had it, or would he just sleep?
Would the Prophet ﷺ?
Yeah.
That is a good question. I can't answer. I don't know. We just know that he encouraged us, and it's reported about him that he would go to sleep in a state of wudu. We also know that the Prophet ﷺ, as a general habit, always liked to maintain his wudu, right? And it's encouraged to do that. That scholars, my teacher said that he told me once very explicitly, try to always keep your wudu. It'll protect you from the waswasa of shaitan when you're out and about in the world, not even when you're like in your house or in the masjid, but like at work, walking around, doing whatever, is that endeavor to aspire to have your wudu when you're out. And if you can do that's great, mashallah. There's blessings in it for you, inshallah, if you can. And I definitely encourage people to try it. Yes.
I had a question about the first one. It's just like sleeping before Isha.
Mm-hmm.
Is it permissible to, if you were to fall asleep and you woke up in the middle of the night before Fajr and you prayed your Isha, or is it just also not allowed?
No, it's definitely allowed, right? It's disliked here. This hadith is saying it's just like to sleep before Isha, and then like you pray your Isha, and then like you're wired, right? You're like, oh, now I might as well. Now I'm awake, and I mean different people have different physiological needs, but we're talking about what the sort of the norm for most people, right? Some people have different patterns and jobs, and I mean obviously we have, mashallah, we all know doctors or have doctors in our families, and different people have shifts and all of that. That's understandable, but to answer your question, if you fall asleep because you're exhausted, you're fatigued, and then you wake up at like 2, 3 in the morning, you haven't prayed your Isha, yes, of course your Isha is completely valid at that point, and you should pray, and then and I might add, if you're up at that time anyhow, then just do 2 extra rakat, and inshallah that was after your Isha, and that counts as like your tahajjud, right? Your qiyam al-layl, because you're doing it in the night after before your fajr, for example. So that's definitely encouraged. Okay, inshallah, moving on. Now, the Prophet ﷺ said, when one of you goes to his bed, he should take hold of his lower garment and clean his bed with it. Then he should mention the name of Allah, for he does not know what he left upon his bed. When he intends to lie down, he should lie down on his right. Just a few comments on this is that when one of you goes to his bed, he should take hold of his lower garment and clean his bed with it. He should then mention the name of Allah, for he does not know what he left his bed upon. When he intends to lie down, he should lie down on his right. So we actually just talked about this in a second before, right? When you go to lie down, say the dua of lying down in your bed. Allahumma bismika amutu wa ahya, right? Or at least say Bismillah when you're lying down with the intention of sleeping in your bed. When you lie down on your right. We already talked about that. The first part is what we didn't comment on before. When you go to your bed, you should take hold of your lower garment and clean your bed with it. And scholars have said it's a sunnah to like take your sheets and go like this once, or take your blanket and to go like this, because you don't know, God forbid, what could have crawled into your bed, whether it was a scorpion or a cockroach, some sort of insect or something like that. Now, I think one difference that we may note is that they were living in a society in Medina Munawwara or Makkah Mukarramah, they were in the desert, right? Where they didn't have the kind of like literally insulated houses that we have right now. Not that you don't have all sorts of like insects and things that are crawling around, at your house unbeknownst to you at certain times. But for them, it was more likely, shall we say, right, that something could have crawled in. And if you've ever slept, if you've ever been in these kind of tropical or equatorial climates, you know that, or if you've ever visited these kinds of places. But the sunnah for us is that to take your sheet and just shake it once before you get into bed, and you're doing amal, you're acting upon the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and then you're getting into your bed. So I'll leave it at that. The next is the Prophet ﷺ said, when a man awakens during the night and he wakes his wife and they pray together 2 bowings, right, rakatain, then they will both be recorded among the men and women who remember Allah often. And the takeaway for us is, may we all be blessed with spouses like this. And if we don't have spouses like this, may we aspire, inshallah, God willing, to want to have spouses that if you awaken in the night, you wake them up and you say, hey, let us pray, right? Pray your tahajjud or pray 2 rakat in the middle of the night. There's benefit for you, and you, inshallah, be recorded amongst the dhakireen, those who remember, make dhikr of Allah often, right? It's a huge blessing from Allah if you have a spouse like that. And for our purposes, and I have a lot to say about marriage and looking what you should look for in a spouse and how to get married and whatnot. That's a conversation for another time. I will simply leave it at this. Aspire to be that kind of person. Right? Be the kind of person, right? Because I do a lot of premarital and then postmarital counseling, is that people are like, I'm looking for this, and this quality, these and these qualities in him or her, right? That I want to marry. And I understand that. That's a conversation you have with people you trust, and you build confidence with them. They're they're looking out for you, etc. But one magic piece of that puzzle that I always tell them is that, like, you should also aspire to be that person that has these wonderful qualities. So when he or she is looking, you meet those criteria, so to speak, right, for that person. That in that, or that you have that shauq, you have that desire to, be that kind of person in your life and in the life of another person, inshallah. Now, the next hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, lock the doors, tie the water skins, turn over the vessels, cover the vessels, put out the lamps. Shaitan does not open a locked door, nor untie a water skin, nor uncover a vessel. A mouse can cause a house to burn down with its inhabitants inside of it. This is the last hadith we're going to comment on right now. We're going to stop then, inshallah, because we're starting a whole new section called Manners for the Household, which inshallah we will pick up next semester. And again, all these slides are online. I definitely encourage you to go back and review what we already discussed and go and look forward, inshallah, and into the material that's to come. Now, the takeaway from all of this is it's from the adab of your domicile, right? Of your place of living, whether it's your apartment, you even think about it in your dorm room, inshallah, when you're blessed with a house, is like, don't leave your house or your room a mess when you go to sleep. Lock your doors, put away your laundry, like tidy up your space, your workspace, close your computer, like put away your papers and books, right? If you have food, put away the food in the fridge, like, cover your vessels. If you have water in container, etc., put out the lamps, turn off the lights, all of that. Like, go to sleep by having you get what I'm saying? With you've prepared your living space and your workspace, and in this day and age, it's all kind of shared for us anyway, right? In that, go to sleep having cleaned up and tidied up your living quarters, and inshallah, that's khair for you. That's benefit for you in it. And lock your doors when you go to sleep at night as well. And this is, one can call it common sense. We follow the prophetic advice and guidance on this from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there's so many benefits upon benefits for doing this. And I encourage people to do that. I understand, going back to what we were talking about earlier, and then I'm going to stop with this in just a moment, is that our lives are so busy and oftentimes so complex, and we're juggling so many things that people feel like I'm just going to study and then pass out and go to sleep, or I have friends over and I'm not going to bother to clean up, I'll do it later. Nobody likes cleaning up after a party. Trust me, if you host a lot, you know how the fun is over, everyone's gone home, and it's just now you got to put away the dishes or throw away the trash or take out the trash or tidy up the place. If you have wonderful, amazing roommates that you live with, you all chip in together, and it's kind of a great team effort. But the point is that we should aspire to be people that just live a neat and clean and tidy, ordered life, right? Not to be living in the midst of chaos. That's really, I think, the takeaway for me. One of the benefits of this is that we're not people of chaos, right? We're people of a sense of simplicity. We're a people of modesty. We're a people of orderliness and cleanliness. And the idea of adab is this is embedded in that. And I think it has such ramifications in so many avenues and aspects of our lives, right? From the simple things, the mundane things, right? To other aspects of how you live your life. So inshallah, I hope this was beneficial to you. Again, I'll say it one last time, is really be mindful of taking care of your sleep. Inshallah, you'll find that there's tremendous benefits in really being disciplined about how you sleep. Maybe another time we can talk about dreams, and the quality of your sleep will, in some ways, impacts your dreams, right? And there's a lot that one can talk about, psycho-spiritual analysis of why we dream and what happens, what things represent in your dream. And our tradition has things to say about this, right? That we have dream interpretation in our tradition, and there are certain times and certain things that you see in your dream that are good news, and there's certain things that are frightening in your dreams that one that should actually be alarming and whatnot. That's another conversation for another time. But all of these things are interconnected, right? They're interwoven with each other. That's what I'm trying to get at. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us to be people that study the beautiful life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that learn the gems and the jewels from it, and that apply them into our lives, and that aspire to have the best adab in our own lives, and then how we treat others around us, following and emulating the noble example of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Jazakumullah khair for attending. Inshallah, we'll see everyone after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.